Taking advantage of some internet drama, Tucker Carlson has featured Candace Owens as his latest guest on his X show. The pair covered a bunch of topics, including Owens' spat with Ben Shapiro, who works with her at the Daily Wire, about the Israel-Hamas conflict. They also talked about Nikki Haley's appalling attacks on free speech. Now, Owens has claimed that Shapiro was the one who crossed the line with ad hominem attacks. Let's watch.
I can't respond to it on a level of intellect because there's nothing that he has expressed in that, at least in that short clip, that he fundamentally disagrees with in terms of what I said. But I will say that I'm not going to respond with the same ad hominem attacks. Yes. I don't think it helps further discussion. And if that was me that was caught on a video saying that about colleagues that I work with, I would be embarrassed. So I think that the video speaks more to Ben's character than it speaks to mine.
The two then discussed Nikki Haley's authoritarian positions on privacy online. Owens accused Haley of not really running for president, but running for positions in the private sector afterwards. Let's take a look.
Well, Nikki Haley is someone that I would describe as radical. She's a radical in this moment, and she's trying to present her opinions as not radical by hiding behind a terrorist attack, and it's not going to age well. So right now in this moment, people are like, this rhetoric is totally fine. You're going to look back in a year, and people are going to say, actually, this was kind of crazy, some of the things that she said. You know, she, in my view, has become increasingly radical every time she even hits the debate stage. I don't even know, what country she's running for president in.
Right.
And I think Vivek Ramaswamy called her out accurately. And based on even my own personal experiences with her, which I've documented on my podcast, as somebody who isn't looking to actually win president, doesn't want to become president of the United States, what she's looking to do is to secure certain contracts after she leaves the stage and she loses.
So as we talked about yesterday, this was all prompted by a video of Ben Shapiro caught on camera saying that Candace Owens had a faux sophistication about the issue of Israel-Palestine and, basically calling what her beliefs disgusting.
Although, to be clear, I'm not 100% on the timeline here. They might have filmed this before that happened. I don't know
well, it sounded,
exactly how this
It sounded like she was alluding to that. She said, if I were caught on camera saying what he was caught on camera saying about a colleague, then I would be embarrassed about that. I'm not sure what else I could...
But wasn't the Bible verse thing in response to something else?
No, I didn't think so. I thought it was all stemming from that first TikTok clip. But so now we've had this escalation, even since we recorded yesterday, where there's been this exchange of volleys on the internet. So we read the Bible verse yesterday. Ben Shapiro's comeback seems to be to try to perhaps urge her to quit, try to tempt her into quitting. He quote tweeted her Bible verse saying, Candace, if you feel that taking money from the Daily Wire somehow comes between you and God, by all means quit. She responded saying, you have been acting unprofessional and emotionally unhinged for weeks now, and we have all had to sit back and allow it, and have all tried to exercise exceeding understanding for your raw emotion. But you cross a certain line when you come for scripture and read yourself into it. She elsewhere said, I can quote the Bible, it's not about you.
They would be making a huge mistake to fire her. So obviously, I don't know the exact leadership structure at the Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro is like the co-founder of it. I think he might have an editor-in-chief emeritus title. I don't think he's technically in charge, but maybe he sits on the board or something. It's him and Jeremy Boring. And I believe Jeremy Boring took a leave of absence from the company to help make some of those films, those documentaries, the anti-woke Snow White movie, those kinds of things. So I don't know who exactly is in charge. They'd be making a huge mistake to get rid of Candace Owens, because then she'll say, you effectively canceled me for my views. Which is their whole, I think that will be very toxic for their brand. So they shouldn't do that. So you're right. Instead, he's trying to induce her to quit. Look, I think disagreement between colleagues is healthy, obviously. I mean, it's a little different on our show because it's set up as a debate show. They're supposed to be kind of ideologically, they're all conservatives. They're all right-wing people. But that demonstrates that there is a real difference of opinion on foreign policy, on national security, on the right. There is the, I guess, Ben Shapiro, Nikki Haley wing that thinks no amount of support to a foreign government allied with us is enough, and that the American taxpayer should stomach that forever because it's very important. And then there's a Tucker, Candace, and also a lot of other people who think that it's almost a red flag to care so much about another country's security when there are so many problems at home that we can't seem to find solutions for, ways to pay for, and the American people are have inflation problems and housing problems and medical problems and drug addiction problems and crime issues in some places, and those things aren't being dealt with. But when a foreign country suffers an admittedly horrific terrorist attack for which you and I disagree on what the proper response is from the people involved in the conflict, but on what our responsibility is, moral support, they want to purchase supplies from us, that's fine by me, but I don't see it being healthy for U.S. national security to be more involved in a conflict in the Middle East. That's a lesson we've learned over and over again, and that is the difference between a Candace Owens and a Ben Shapiro right now.
Yeah, what I didn't realize about Ben Shapiro, I thought this was just an isolated issue because he has always been very committed to the project of Zionism. I didn't realize he also felt the same way about Ukraine. I didn't realize he was one of the few kind of, no, we got to keep funding Ukraine folks on that side of the aisle or that corner of the political spectrum. So at least he's consistent. But I got to say, Candace Owens is incredibly right from my perspective on this issue. Her description of Nikki Haley, her warning about how this is going to look with the passage of time and the lessons that we should have learned from the post 9/11 era are right on and are exactly what you could hear out of any peace movement actor, any leftist, any person on the other side of the ideological divide. And it is no accident that she has found herself paired up with Tucker Carlson in this moment, who was one of not just the few, if not only, voices on Fox News that advanced that kind of narrative. He, in some ways, is ground zero for that belief system having the legs to really grow. Because he had the platform of Fox News to basically make it okay, or to give a signpost for other conservatives who might have felt that way to say, yes, we are actually a part of a movement. Yeah,
and because he didn't create those feelings in the base or on the right. Those feelings existed. In fact, they were probably more popular at all times than the kind of neoconservatism that Ben Shapiro represents. But they had they didn't have the same access and outlets. They didn't have the same amount of credibility, and they didn't have someone, a very influential popular figure who was making those points until Tucker came along. Obviously, they had some of them. Ron Paul was a big influence on the right, in between libertarianism and conservatism in speaking to those issues. Had more military supporters than anyone else when he ran for president in 2008. Could fill stadiums and et cetera with his supporters from right and left who agreed on a different foreign policy, and that has left its mark and led to the rise of Trump, frankly, and the counter-programming, counter-narrative on foreign policy. Yeah. So this is interesting seeing it kind of spill out in the open internally to one admittedly very vast conservative media empire where the split on this is pretty pronounced.
Yeah. Well, the pair also dove into the backlash at universities where donors began pulling funding surrounding, quote, anti-Semitic protests on campus. Let's look at that.
However, then I thought, well, wait a second. If the biggest donors at, say, Harvard have decided, well, we're going to shut it down now, where were you the last 10 years when they were calling for white genocide? You were allowing this. And then I found myself really hating those people, actually. You're okay with that? On what grounds were you okay with that?
And this is what I've been trying to explain to the pro-Israel lobby, that what you are seeing as lack of support is people that are asking the question is, where were you as we have endured all of this?
You were paying for it, actually. Right. You were paying for it.
You were paying for it.
You were calling my children immoral for their skin color. You paid for that. And so why shouldn't I be mad at you? I don't understand.
And so that is, obviously you have a ton of white people that are asking this question, and they're now being called anti-Semitic. And I think that that's wrong. I think these are meaningful questions that deserve to be answered. Why was this sort of verbiage allowed into the curriculum? I mean, could you imagine if in the curriculum it said that every Jewish person born is a terrorist?
Yeah, I think I said the exact same sentence as Tucker there on, well, where have you been for the last 10 years? You're outraged as a donor now, but these universities have been engaged in policies that are hostile to the right for years and years and years. Harvard systematically just had to be ordered by the Supreme Court to stop abjectly discriminating against Asian students, and no one cared. Now you're upset, and I think that's the feeling there.
I don't understand the confusion. A Jewish group doesn't want what they perceive to be Jewish interests. They're Israeli interests. It's Zionism. But a Jewish group says it's mad when something bad, in their view, happens to Jewish people. Why should they be invested in anything that happens to any other? I mean, it's an interest group, right? Like, I don't understand why that's so confusing.
Well, also on the right and the libertarian right, we're also opposed to that kind of collectivist identity politics-based thinking.
That's not true. People very much feel like collectivist identity-based thinking if it's their identity and their collective feeling. That's why the frustration to me is that everybody weaponizes identity. Not that I'm only mad when black people do it or only mad when Jewish people do it. You have to be consistent. Well, there is a white identity. Tucker Carlson's whole spiel is that this is a white Christian nation, that it's being changed, it's striking at the heart of the both racial and cultural and ethnic identity of this country, and that we have to stop it by changing our immigration laws, deporting human beings, doing population control in various ways, et cetera, et cetera. That's like that is what the Great Replacement theory is, that he has been criticized for by people across the spectrum for the last couple of years.
Right. My criticism of his views vis-a-vis the Great Replacement theory is that the people coming into the country are not actually as hostile to conservative or right-wing values as the theory would have them be. If you're afraid of bad ideas harming our country or bad cultural practices, they're homegrown. In fact, they are manufactured at these elitist universities where the wealthiest, most educated people are. So I would rather have more immigrants coming in and more elite Ivy League college administrators exiting, and I think if I put it that way to Tucker, he might agree with me.
I think we have to be really clear about what's happening. We're talking about elite universities right now.
Right, the most racist.
Wait a minute. Right now, billionaires are withdrawing funds from Harvard University.
I wish they'd done it sooner. That's what I'm saying.
Because students, these elitists that are supposed to be the root of the problem, these blue-haired hippies, the students are the ones in groups like Jews for Palestine and People for Palestine, all of those groups, that are standing up to the establishment of the university, standing up to the establishment of this country. So people's wires are getting crossed. Who's the elitist here? Is it the Harvard students and their wokeness and their safetyism? Right now, we have primetime anchors like Jay Tapper interviewing a minority of students, like this Jewish student at MIT, who says she feels unsafe at campus because the rest of the students, in large numbers, are protesting the hawkish establishment and they're framing genocidal acts of both the U.S. government and our client states across the world, specifically in this case in Israel. And so it's a completely confused message that's coming out of the right now. They feel like, identity, something, something, something. But like, there are Harvard people on both sides of this, and the Harvard people that you purport to not like right now, the Wetzlers, the millionaires and billionaires, are the ones that are both funding all of these right-wing news sources and establishment liberal news sources as well, don't get me wrong, and who you have not had a problem with until they start to have an ideological divide with you over these narrow issues.
This is what I think the conservatives' position on this is that you wealthy Jewish donors are now want to withdraw funds because what you perceive that there's a lot of anti-Jewish in their view, this is anti-Jewish racism.
Yeah.
So we're going to withdraw funding because we don't endorse this. And what I think Tucker was getting at, and people on the right are getting at, is that, you only care now, but these universities have practiced racism against white people. Let me finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
White people and Asian people for years, and you didn't care about that. You only cared when it was your people, Jewish people.
Yeah.
And so we're not sympathetic to that. That's what.
Yeah, but
that's what conservatives say.
I get that.
You should have disinvested from the universities because they're bad and racist.
Why are you surprised at that? Like, we've been talking about this for years. Why is it that a million celebrities say a bunch of bigoted, racist, homophobic, horrible things every day of the week, but Kanye West gets debanked for his anti-Semitism?
Sure.
He's not the only anti-Semite in America. I can't.
Right. We're striving for an ideological consistency that is based in actually non-racism.
Sure, but this is why I have a problem with this always being framed in these identity terms, whether it's these people like Tucker Carlson doing white identity politics, or liberals doing people of color or our friends identity politics. It's a power issue. This isn't about, Jewish special interests or anything crazy and anti-Semitic like that. People in power are always going to protect their interest, whatever they perceive their interest to be. The investment of the United States in Israel isn't about having a love relationship with Jewish people. And you see that when you see how these Jewish protesters are being attacked and harassed by the police all over the country. You see that when they invite a known anti-Semite like John Hagee to speak at the pro-Israel rally earlier this week. What it's about for Christian evangelicals like him is like scripture that says that Jesus won't come back unless Jewish people are in the Holy Land. And what it is for our government is about having an outpost, a client state in the Middle East, and oil in geopolitical strategic interests. So I do wish that sometimes people like Tucker Carlson would focus more squarely on that and stop trying to confuse the message by saying, okay, but why weren't you withdrawing money and being more hateful against when X group was at issue or where Y group was at issue? Because it's also self-interested.
That's the left view. The right view is these people should not be, is that don't come crying to us now that your identity group is it's interpersonal.
Like the left view, you're right, is not that my identity politics is better than your identity politics.
That's not the right view. The right view is that these donors are engaged in identity politics, and we're rejecting that.
I think the donors are protecting their interests, which is what donors do.
We're not disputing that.
Yeah,
we're criticizing that from a different
I'm just saying, don't be surprised, Tucker Carlson. This is what donors do. And if you don't want to be caught up in the vagaries of what billionaire donors do, don't invest and don't allow them to be the ones that are funding your universities. You need to have, the state funding of these kinds of institutions so you're not able to get jerked around in these sorts of ways. And that's the same for media institutions, too.
Yeah, we absolutely do not want that on the right, but we don't have time to get into that. More Rising right after this.